This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome, is it Gary? Yeah, please welcome Gary.
I'm Gary L. Coleman, and I'm an alcoholic. Too late now. Welcome to all the newcomers, and I have no idea whether you're new or you're returning, and if you're returning, how many times you've returned. But if you're here tonight and you're clean and sober, it's a gift. And congratulations to all the cake takers. And they really said all that we need to hear tonight. So I'm just going to stand up here and say it all over again. And for those of you who nod off, I'll hit the microphone when I'm through, and you can. I want to thank Michelle for inviting me to participate in my own recovery. And she's never heard me, so if I piss you off, don't hold it against her. The only person in the room I know other than my wife, or the only person I recognize that I know in the room other than my wife, is Mickey. And we go back a ways. It's always good to see somebody who's stuck it out through thick and thin. And if you're here new tonight, you need to know that you'll have to stick it out through thick and thin. I guess many, many years ago, they used to say, keep coming back, it'll get better, and then somebody realized that's not quite honest. And they changed it to what is honest. Keep coming back and it'll get different. And different usually turns out to be a hell of a lot better. I was born in Pennsylvania before almost anyone in this room, maybe a few of you. It was so far back there wasn't any rock and roll. Can you imagine that? And most of you can't imagine that, actually. There was no Elvis. And there was Alcoholics Anonymous. It had been around about a year when I showed up. I was raised by a single mother. Did I say Pennsylvania? None of this has anything to do with why I'm an alcoholic, but just so you know that I didn't just fall off the back of the truck and walk in here. For those of you who have seen the Body Snatchers. Anyhow, I was born in Pennsylvania and moved to California in 1947 with my mother. And by that time, I now know, though, newcomers, I hope you hear this stuff because you're brain damaged. And that's, people always laugh at that. You are brain damaged. So was I, and maybe in a sense, maybe still a little sometimes. But where was I going with that? By the time I was 14, by the time I was 14 years old and picked up the first substance that I picked up, I now realize I was depressed, filled with anxiety, filled with anger, and didn't know how to behave. And I had been that way for a long time. And I can get all psychological about it, and I've had to do that as a part of what has happened in my life since I got sober, but I'm not going to bore you with most of that. Suffice it to say that due to the family that I grew up in, I was an only child, raised by a single mother, never knew my father, was told stories about my father that did not, one story didn't agree with the other one, so I always grew up thinking he either was a Nazi because I'm of German heritage, and one story was that he went back to Germany to fight with Hitler. So that's how far back this goes, folks. And I had curly hair and liked rhythm and blues, so I thought maybe my old man was black. Again, not a joke, totally serious. I mean, when you don't know, you got to make something up, and whatever seems to fit, that's what I made up, and that's what I always wondered about. I had a lot of things that I filled the blanks in with, but by the time I was 14 and entering high school, the summer before I entered high school, I was working at a car wash in Alhambra, and I've already said that I was, by that time, filled with anxiety, anger, depression, and did not know how to fit in. I just simply did not know how anybody did that. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I now know, in looking back and recalling some of the feelings I did have, that it was a total mystery to me. I wasn't quite sure I wanted to fit in. It seemed kind of boring to me, in a sense. I liked fantasy. Anyhow, the summer of my 13th year, approaching 14, going into high school, I was at the car wash and worked there part-time. And one of the guys from the Fair Oaks district in Pasadena, who was kind of a hero of mine, a black guy who was kind of a burned-out boxer, and I was really muscular, and he was really hip, I thought. And he bought me, it was lunch, it was the lunch break this Saturday, and he asked if I wanted some beer. He was going across the street to buy his lunch at this grocery store, and I said, yeah, I'd never had a drink, as far as I recall. And I didn't come from, at that point, my mother and I were living with her parents, my grandparents. If there was booze in the house, I don't know where the hell it was. I've thought of that many times. I think maybe I saw a can of beer someplace, and maybe they had wine or something stored somewhere in the house for special occasions or something, but drinking was a total non-deal in that house. So this guy asked me if I wanted beer, and I said yeah, and he brought me a whole quart of Miller's High Life, and that was the day the earth became a doable thing, and I changed, society changed. This guy's name was John, and all of a sudden I was looking a lot more like John, you know, tough guy and hip, slick, and cool. And we sat in his car and with some other guys. They smoked reefers and listened to Hunter Hancock on the radio. I don't know whether anyone remembers Hunter Hancock, but maybe a couple of nodding heads. He's probably Googling him, get him on iTunes today. God knows, I don't know what the hell. Anyhow, so the point of all this is, the minute that pretty close to the minute that I drank that Miller's High Life, the whole thing changed for me. And I thought, this is pretty cool. And I didn't get sick that time, but I enjoyed the rest of the afternoon at the car wash. And I remember as I walked, if you walked from the car wash right up this alley, you were in the backyard of the house that I was growing up in. And I remember walking up that alley to my house and thinking, what am I going to do now? Because I didn't have any beer, and I couldn't go to the store and buy any, and I knew there was none at the house. Now, I didn't do a lot of cognition on all this stuff, but I remember that kind of thought happening. So very shortly thereafter, I was in high school, and I had worked also on a telephone bank thing, selling pens that didn't work to people who didn't need them. And one of the guys working there was an older teenager who was an apprentice jockey at Santa Anita. And he told me that he had this stuff that he could bring some for me, and it was marijuana. And I thought, that's really exotic and criminal and far out, and so it seemed intriguing to me. And so the next weekend, he brought me this little marijuana And it was, why does any of this matter? A light brown paper, and the paper smelled good, and I was all hot to trot, with that. And so a friend of mine who was a year older than me, who later became a cop, he and I planned this special event where we were going to smoke this stick and enter Nirvana or something. We didn't know much about it, That was a pretty, except for the car wash and the guys who worked there, and I had already started hanging out with some black people and Chicanos in two different parts of town, because again, my people bored the hell out of me. They still do sometimes. Anyhow, it's another group down the street I'll give that talk to. So the point of all this is that we actually drove in around here from Alhambra. That was a trek in those days, no freeway, and drove around and smoked this joint, and nothing happened. Right? Anybody relate to that? Seems like the first time nothing happens, and then the second time, yeah. I think we did stop and eat, so we probably. But I wasn't. I didn't get it yet. But it was fun because it was, this is my 1950s, and believe it or not, in the 1950s there wasn't a drug dealer on every block like there is now, and I was one of the few people at school who ended up doing drugs. And we all knew each other. I guess that's still true. So by that time, by the time I'd completed the first year of high school, I've left some stuff out for the sake of time here. By the time I'd completed the first year of high school, maybe the second year of high school, I had been drinking whenever I could. I had popped Dexedrine, Benzedrine, shot heroin, smoked opium, tried anything that would work. That was a behavior, somebody mentioned behaviors, that was a behavior that got very deeply stored in my brain. The behavior was, anytime you get a chance to take anything that has any potential whatsoever for changing you, give it a shot. And so if I came to your house, I robbed your medicine cabinet, and I took pills wherever I could find pills, and I'm sure some of them were to, drive fleas away or keep you from getting pregnant, but, what the hell. And so for 28 years, you get the picture, that's what I did. For 28 years, I ingested whatever I could find, whenever I could find it, as much as I could stand it. I've been sober a fair amount of time now, and I was thinking today, most of the drugs I did, not to offend any of you druggies, but I think most of the drugs I did, and we compared notes, we think we probably both downed about 75,000 stimulant pills. We didn't know each other at the time. We'd have been a great pair, both dead today, of course. But the reason I did that, it was to keep the drinking going. I'm not a good drunk. I get drunk in a hurry, which was a blessing, but then I throw up and pass out, which is a drag, So I found that, a couple of mounds of cocaine and a few Ritalin would do the job in keeping me up and alert enough to drink until I had completely lost my mind, which is where I really liked going. Now, I'm going to run out of time in a hurry here. Anyhow, I went in the Army. I got in trouble in the Army, not for bad behavior, but because I drank too much, and started getting sick. And I was only 18 years old, and so I got restricted to barracks and blah 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 blah. I didn't. Before that, when I graduated from Alhambra High School, they wouldn't let me graduate off the stage because I'd been kicked out of school twice, both of those times because I was off campus getting loaded. So I had a resentment with Alhambra High School and education. So I decided when I was in the Army to become a teacher, and that's what I did. And so for 5 years after I got out of the Army and went to college, I was a teacher. I taught music, and I went around to different schools trying to mold young minds while mine was warped. And anyhow, I did that for 5 years, and near the end of that time, I bumped into a bass player friend of mine walking down the street, and she was this famous, the first girl bass player making it in the studios. And she asked me what I'd been doing because we used to play gigs together, and she hadn't seen me for a while. And I told her I was teaching school, and blah, 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 blah. And she said she was doing record dates in Hollywood, and I should try and do that. And I said, fine, that sounds great to me. And she told me how much she had made that day, and it was more than I'd made in a month or something like that. And I thought, that's attractive. So I went to a party at her house, at which everyone got completely blotto. And she represented me to these people as being one of the greatest jazz vibe players west of the Mississippi. And because everyone was so drunk, no one thought to say, well, I've never heard of you. The following week, I was on my first record date, and that was 1965. And I retired from that business 9 years ago. So I got 37 years in. For those of you looking around this crowd, there have got to be some people who know about that business and stuff. Back in 1965, if you could read at all and you like to get shit-faced, you probably get a job in the studios. And I filled both those. Most of the record dates that were called for 7 o'clock didn't hear a note until 10, or something like that, because by that time we'd had the wine and snorted a little and smoked a little and blah, blah, blah. Business changed over the years, and for those of you in this room who are in it now, I guess, my daughter's still in it. I think things have cleaned up or gone more deeply into the closet. But in those days, it was right flat out there, and so everybody just got loaded all the time, and nobody, blinked an eye or raised an eyebrow. That's what you did, and I loved doing it, and that's what I did. Now, in high school, I spent most of my time looking out of the windows of that school, dreaming about the day I was going to be a famous musician. Well, I never became a famous musician, but I became a working musician, and so now my dream had come true. And when I was looking out of the windows of that school, I pictured myself living in the Hollywood Hills. And a few years after 1965, I was living in the Hollywood Hills. And I had cars, and the kids were in private school, and I had married my high school sweetheart, and we actually owned 2 homes. And the reason I'm saying any of this stuff is not to impress you, because I know damn well it won't. But if there's anyone sitting out there who thinks that if you get sober and get that stuff, your life will be great. If you get it back or you never had it and you're here to get it, you're in trouble. And I hope I get to that in the next 7 minutes, because at 10 till, yeah. Good Lord. Suffice it to say that after 28 years of drinking and using, and there I was in the house that I dreamed of, and doing the stuff that I loved to do, and making a lot of money doing it, and working with people who were famous, and blah, 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 blah. I was also suicidal, homicidal, paranoid to the max. Used to, look at the light switches to see if they'd been, loosened so that they put the bugs under there so the CIA or the FBI would come and arrest me for withholding tax from my telephone bill to protest the Vietnam War. I was sure I was going to end up in San Quentin for the rest of my life for that. Little over-amplified sense of self there. And so in 1978, just after my then wife and I had celebrated 20-some years of marriage, she brought a couple of ultra-feminist artist friends of hers to the house, and it was a Saturday, and that Saturday night I was supposed to put them and my wife in the car and tour around the studios and other places and show them the sights. They were from New York and had not really been to Hollywood before. And I was a blackout drinker, okay? So I couldn't tell you, I drank and used for 28 years, certainly for 18 of those years. I couldn't tell you what happened on any given day after about 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening. And from that point on, I had no idea what happened. And I never sweated because I thought, yeah. And guys I worked with, it was the same thing. You know, we'd all show up to work the next morning and nobody knew what we'd done the night before. But this particular time, my wife was good enough to tell me in detail what I'd done the night before. And what I'd done the night before, I'm not going to tell you in detail, although there are no children here. Suffice it to say that instead of taking those two feminists on a tour, I had come up with the idea of some indoor activities that I thought would be fun, and had presented these to the two women who, I guess, abruptly went down and went to sleep in the guest bedroom. My wife was not particularly pleased about that. I thought she might be into it, but anyhow. And so the next thing I know, I do not remember any of this. She told me this stuff, and as she was telling me this stuff, I picked up a chair and hit her with it and drove her across the bedroom of our house into the closet, and her head was bleeding. And I had that moment of clarity, newcomers. If you've had one, I hope you have. It's one of the kind of necessary things, I think. But I had that moment of clarity, and I realized this was the girl, this Chicana from Boyle Heights, that I'd fallen in love with when I was 14 years old, and here we were 42 years old, and I just tried to kill her because she was objecting to my indoor activities with two women who were not interested in me. So all of that boils down to one thing. If you said that in a psychiatrist's office, you'll probably get locked up before you get to your car. It's insane behavior, and I was so used to it, I, again, didn't think much of it. But I got the point that morning, and I realized I'd become a clear and present danger to myself and others, and so I turned myself into a hospital, went in there for 3 days, came out, and started coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. However, I haven't had a drink since September 4th, 1978. That's when that happened. I came to meetings for 4.5 months, and I loved meetings like this with the bathroom back there. Although this is an hour meeting, so it becomes a little more clumsy. But an 1.5-hour meeting, on the coffee break, you go into the bathroom, snort a little Coke, chew up a couple of pills, and then come out and talk about sobriety. That's what I did for 4.5 months, and ended up back kind of being suicidal, homicidal, coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. So, if you're sitting here tonight with a little thing in your wallet or a couple of pills in the car or something, good luck. I discovered the program does not work unless you're actually abstinent from those substances. So in 2.5 minutes, what happened in the ensuing, will be 31 years in January, is that I started actually working a program. And I did what my sponsor suggested I do. And he suggested that I needed to change just about everything about me. Now, that's a misspeak, actually, I've come to understand. I can't change anything except my behavior. But what changes within me, right? Behavior is kind of an external event. What changes within me changes because the 12 steps, it turns out, are better at this time in 2009, are still better than anything else anyone else had come up with. And what it does is, and one of the birthday cake takers said this, it changes our behavior. If you're really going to work a program, now you'll see Mickey's been around a while and others in this room that I don't know have been around a while. You probably can pick some people on a list who have been sober my length of time and more, and you do not want what they have. And the reason you don't and you shouldn't want what they have is because all they've done is stay clean and sober. That's not what AA is about. AA is an internal change so deep and so drastic that you end up being someone that you actually were supposed to be. And if you're like me, you'll discover that I never knew who I was supposed to be, and I'm still learning. I was violent, sarcastic, cynical, and all of that was to protect myself from actually getting hurt. Because my fear when I was out there was any kind of a loss, any kind of a thing that might upset me, I couldn't handle it. And I have a whole talk on the brain, but that's why I said, you guys who are new here, you broke your brain. That's what you did. Don't kid yourself. I could go into receptor sites and to neurotransmitters in the brain and all that kind of stuff. I know a lot about it now because I've studied it for about 20-some years in sobriety. The only way we can stay sober is to change all of our behavior and to really get that joy and inner peace, to live actually as apparently God intended it, happy, joyous, and free, being of service to people who you may or may never meet again, and for no price. That requires a deep psychic change. And they've known that since Carl Jung was around in the 1800s. This program brings it about, but you got to work the steps. And what I've discovered is, as I work the steps, what I actually do is almost nothing except stop doing all the stuff I used to do. That's really what it is. And it took me years and years and years and years to understand that. So if you're trying to work a strong, hard program, take a deep breath. Easy does it. Just try to stop putting things in front of your program. Try to stop putting things that separate you from God and from your fellows. It's really that simple. And when I do that, which I do at least a little bit most days, I have a great day, despite the outside circumstances or even physical circumstances. My second sponsor is dying of cancer as we speak. He may be dead by this time. I don't know. He's right on the brink. Somebody saw him a few days ago and reported to us that he said, you know, the body's failing, but inside spirit, fine, no problem. And if you really believe, I'll leave you with this to ponder and disagree with me if you wish. If I actually believe in God and God's a loving God, and I don't believe in hell, and I don't, then death is not a punishment. No problem at all. Totally safe. The only thing is you have to change your plans. And no one seems to know what those plans have to be for the next thing, but I think that might be taken care of. Anyhow, I'm grateful to be a member, a clean and sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this was a great experience for me to come here, really. I don't know whether you got anything out of what I said, but it was great sitting there watching people take chips and cakes, and I hope we all keep coming back, and thanks for listening.